Hello, good morning, students. So, welcome once again to this new class where we shall discuss about different types of farming. I am quite sure you might have observed people doing different types of farming in your own locality. So, agriculture, it is the age-old practice in our country. From our forefathers onwards, they were doing mainly the agriculture, the farm works. They were doing different types of cultivation. Some cultivate in the wet field, some cultivate in the dry field, some cultivate in the hilly place. So different places are there. Accordingly, they choose the crops. What crops to be cultivated? In the winter, they will cultivate one crop. In the summer, they will cultivate another crop. So according to the physical features, according to the climate, they always choose the right crop. So let us see today which are the types of farming that are there, not only in India but even all around the world. Let us see what kind of farming the people are choosing all over the world. You can take your textbook, page number 34. So yesterday we just started the introduction about agriculture. What is agriculture? All that. So today we shall start in the proper way. So types of farming. Agriculture is an age-old practice. You know that in our country. Even now, more than 50% of the people are earning their livelihood by working in the farms. So it is an age-old practice. So olden times, almost 100% we could say they were working in the farm. Maybe a few exceptions were there, but we can say 95% of the people were there in olden times. Very few were engaged in other activities. And over these years, so from the olden time onwards, we know people have been cultivating. So over these years, what happened? Cultivation methods have changed significantly depending upon the characteristics of physical environment, technological know-how, and socio-cultural practices. So I already said the type of cultivation that people were doing in olden times, it is not the same way people cultivate at the present time. Olden times there were not much technologies. They were mainly depending on human strength, digging, plowing, weeding, harvesting, threshing. Everything was done by human beings. Manually it was done. But in the present situation or in the present age, we find most of these works are taken up by machines. The plowing is done by tractors, the harvesting machines are there, threshing machines are there. For weeding, we put pesticides or weedicides, and we put a lot of fertilizers in order to produce more crops. So the situation has completely changed compared to the olden times. And olden times people did not have much ideas about modern farming. They were mainly following the traditional method of farming. That is what they were doing. And because they were not mainly doing it for commercial purpose, they were doing it for their own sustenance, just to satisfy or just sufficient enough for their family to survive. That was the main purpose. They were not worried about producing plenty and selling it and making money and so. They just cultivate and they get a normal harvest. That is enough for their family. That was their custom. But now the situation is changed, and now we know people depending on the environment. What are the type of environment that surrounds them? The climate, the physical features, the rain, the wind, all these they consider. Accordingly they do the cultivation. And they also have got a lot of technological know-how. So now we can consult, so many experts are there in the agricultural field. experts, agricultural engineers are there. We can test the soil and see what is the quality of the soil, what are the elements lacking in the soil, and what is the water content of the soil. All these things we can know through scientific methods. So all the times it was never heard of. Our forefathers, they knew to test by themselves. They will know whether the soil is good or not by looking at it. But now we can accurately find out whether the soil is good or not by testing in the laboratory. And also we know we have a lot of socio-cultural practices are there. According to the society, lot of social practices are there, cultural practices are there. So all these are involved, all these are playing a major part in this present society, in the present situation. Then farming varies from subsistence to commercial type. So the type of cultivation or type of farming that our forefathers were doing was farming of subsistence, that is to sustain oneself. Subsistence means just cultivating for one's own need. That is what our forefathers were doing. But now it has gone up to the level of commercial farming. So now the big farmers, their main purpose is not only just to satisfy their needs, but they also want to produce a maximum and want to sell it in the market and make profit. That has become their aim. So two types of farming we just said. One is subsistence farming, that is cultivating or farming for one's own family's needs. Another one is commercial farming, that is to sell the product in the market and make profit. That is so in between there are different types of farmings are there. We will be seeing them one by one. Then at present in different parts of India, so coming to India, we can see in different parts of India different types of farming is practiced. So we shall see what are the types of farming that is practiced in India now. So one is called primitive subsistence farming. So primitive subsistence farming. So as I said, subsistence farming means cultivating for one's own needs. And for that we have to add another word, primitive. Primitive means olden style. So how people were cultivating olden times using old methods for one's own family. Let's see that. So this type of farming is still practiced in few pockets of India. So in most of the time or in most of the places, people have changed. They have abandoned this primitive way, old way of farming. But very few places, especially in the interior places of India, this type of farming is still going on. Most of the other places have already abandoned this method of farming and they have updated themselves. They started using modern methods of farming, but very few of them are still managing with primitive farming. So primitive subsistence farming is practiced on small patches of land with the help of tools like hoe, dowel and digging sticks and family or community labor. So in practicing this primitive subsistence farming, what are the elements required? That means first of all the area is very small. They are not cultivating in a large area. They select a small piece of land and they do cultivation by using primitive tools. They are not able to take tractor there, or they are not even able to use other equipments like tiller and so on, or even they may not even use bullocks. They will be using only digging with a stick. Those days, all the times, there was not even spade. People used to dig with a stick. They will be cutting a bent stick and with that like spade they will be digging. So they will be using the old tools like hoe, that is for plowing. Then they may be using dowel, big knife, or they may be using digging sticks. And the members who are working, who are they? They are not going and hiring people from the market to work. They are not hiring any laborers. But the family members themselves will be working. The father, mother, and children, they all will be going and working in the field. That is how the primitive methods are going on. So they have no much expense. The land is there. They don't put any fertilizer, chemical fertilizers they don't put, the pesticides they don't put. So they only just cultivate, put the seed, and the working, everything is done by family members, and therefore there is no much expense. So the food not to consume, they will be able to produce from their field. That is called primitive subsistence farming. I hope you understood. So in primitive subsistence farming, they use the old method. Primitive means old method they use. So they don't use the modern methods, plowing or harvesting. They don't use any machines, but they do it everything by themselves, by using simple tools, by knife, plow, and so on. So if they have a buffalo or a bull, they will be using this animal for plowing and so on. Then this type of farming depends on monsoon, natural fertility of soil, and suitability of other environmental conditions of the crops grown. So here, these farmers who are practicing this primitive subsistence farming, they completely depend on the monsoon rain. So because they have no water supply, they have no irrigation facilities, they are completely depending on the monsoon rain. So if the monsoon is very good, then they will get good harvest. If the monsoon is late or less, then their crops will dry away and they may not have any good harvest. So they are completely depending on monsoon. Then another thing that they depend is natural fertility of the soil. So they are not putting any chemicals there. They may put some cow dung or something, only that. They don't put any chemical fertilizers. So that way they are not spending much money for this cultivation. Then another thing is suitability of other environmental conditions. They will know what are the crops that can grow in this climate. The climate is too hot, or if it is too dry, or if it is too cold. So according to the climatic conditions, they will choose what to cultivate. So that is called primitive subsistence farming. Subsistence means planting for one's own consumption, not for the purpose of selling. And primitive means using old methods. Then it is a slash and burn cultivation. So this primitive methods of cultivation that the people follow, that is a what type of cultivation? You can also call it slash and burn. I am sure in the lower classes you might have already studied about slash and burn, or another name for this slash and burn cultivation is jum cultivation. So people choose a plot of land, they cut down all the trees and plants, grass, everything that is growing there, and they will make it dry and they will put fire, and that ash will be mixed with the soil, and that is only manure that they use. So that is also called slash and burn cultivation or jum cultivation and so on. So farmers clear a patch of land and produce cereals and other food crops to sustain their family. So it is a subsistence farming, therefore it is meant for their own family, for sustenance of their own family, not for selling, not for distributing to others and so on. So when the soil fertility decreases, the farmers shift and clear another patch of land for cultivation. So when they cultivate for the first time, the soil is very good, and it will be able to produce a good harvest. And after a few times cultivation, after a few years of cultivation, the soil becomes very dry again. The fertility, natural fertility is lost. The farmer knows by seeing the soil, the color of the soil, and so he can know whether this soil is good or not. So when he finds this soil is no more good, it is no more able to produce good harvest, then he leaves that land, abandons that land and goes to another place. There also he will do the same thing. He'll cut down all the grass and trees and will burn it, and then start cultivation there. That's why it is called shifting cultivation. Another name for this one is called shifting cultivation. Slash and burn also is correct, because slashing means cutting. They cut down all the trees, then burn, slash and burn. That way the name comes. Shifting cultivation, the name comes because he is shifting from one place to another place. That is called shifting cultivation. And this type of shifting allows nature to replenish the fertility of the soil through natural processes. So one way this shifting is very good, because he will cultivate for a few years, then he will leave it and he will go to another land. So by the time this land is simply left free, so it will have a natural way of recovering the fertility. The trees that are nearby, the leaves will be falling down there, it will be getting rotten there, and the soil will become slowly fertile again. So the way of fertilizing the soil, the natural way, that is also this shifting cultivation is useful for that. Then, so land productivity in this time of agriculture is low, as the farmer does not use fertilizers or other modern inputs. So this natural cultivation, or this primitive subsistence cultivation, or this slashing cultivation, the production is very low. The reason we already said why they get very less harvest. The reason is because the farmer does not add anything extra. He only just cuts the forest and burns it and cultivates. He does not put any extra manure there, no fertilizer there. Therefore, naturally the production of the crop will be less, and it is not meant for selling as well. It is just meant for his own purpose, his own home use. And it is known by different names in different parts of the country. So this cultivation, we already said 2-3 names. One is slash and burn cultivation, another one is shifting cultivation, another one is jung cultivation. So there are different names are there, because this cultivation is practiced in many pockets of India, and so each one is calling name in their own local language. So let us see which are some of the few names for this type of cultivation. So can you name some other type of farming? So apart from this jung cultivation or shifting cultivation, we can also know that permanent cultivation is there, like a field is there. Every year we cultivate in the same place, like our paddy field and so on. Then it is zooming in northeastern states like Assam, Meghalaya, Mizoram and Nagaland. So in the most of the northeastern states, this cultivation, this slash and burn cultivation is known as zooming. You can underline, especially in the states of Assam, Meghalaya, Mizoram and Nagaland. These 4 states, the name of this cultivation is known as zooming. Then in Manipur it is known as Pamlo. Then Dipa in Bastar district of Chhattisgarh, in the district of Chhattisgarh, that is Bastar district of Chhattisgarh, this type of cultivation is known as Dipa. Then in Andaman and Nicobar Islands also it is known as Dipa. So different names. In 4 states of Northeast, Assam, Meghalaya, Mizoram and Nagaland, it is known as zooming. In Manipur it is known as Pamlo. Then In district of Chhattisgarh, it is known as Diva, and also in Andaman and Nicobar Island also it is known as Deepa. Then Juming. So the slash and burn agriculture is known as milpa in Mexico and Central America. So we are moving out of India and we see this type of cultivation is done in other countries as well. So what are they calling it? That is for our general knowledge. So in Mexico it is known as milpa. Then in Central America also it is known as, this type of cultivation is known as milpa. Then in Peninsula it is known as conuco. Then in Brazil it is known as roca. Then in Central Africa it is known as masole, and in Indonesia it is known as ladang. So different names are there. Then in Vietnam it is known as ray. So let us say once again the different names people in different parts of the world are using for this jung cultivation. So in Mexico and Central America it is known as milpa. Then in Peninsula it is known as conuco. Then in Brazil it is known as roca. Then in Central Africa it is known as masole, and in Indonesia it is known as lodang, and in Vietnam it is known as ray. So same type of cultivation, but in different countries people call it by different name. Then in India, this primitive form of cultivation is called Bivar or Dahiya in Madhya Pradesh. So before we saw in Northeast what this cultivation is called. Now we go to the Central India. Let's say in Bihar or in Madhya Pradesh. What do the people call? People in Madhya Pradesh call this type of cultivation as Bivar, or some places it is known as Dahiya. Then in Andhra Pradesh people call it Podu or Penda. Two names they call, Podu or Penda. Then in Odisha people call it by different names. They call Amadabi or Koman or Bringa. So they call in different names in Odisha. Then in the Western Ghats, the mountains, it is known as Kumari. Then Valre or Valtre in southeastern Rajasthan. So in southeastern part of the Rajasthan, it is known as Valtre or Valre. Then Kil in the Himalayan belt. So people who are living nearby Himalaya, the foothills of Himalaya, they call this type of cultivation as Kil. Then Kurwa in Jharkhand. Jharkhand people are calling this type of cultivation as Kurwa. Then Juming in the northeastern region. So again we come to northeast. Most of the places it is, especially in the first stage, it is known as Juming. Then there is an example. Let us see an example of a student. Renchika lived with her family in a small village at the outskirts of Difu in Assam. So we are talking about a small family living in Assam in a place called Difu. She enjoys watching her family members clearing, slashing and burning a patch of land for cultivation. So her family members are doing what type of cultivation? Slash and burn cultivation or Juming. So she used to sit at home or maybe in the veranda and used to look out, and she see her family members. They are cutting down the jungle and clearing it and getting ready the land for cultivation. And she often helps them in irrigating the fields with water running through bamboo canal from the nearby spring. So there is no irrigation facility for them by the government, but there is a stream nearby. From there they will connect a bamboo pipe and reach the water to the field. And this little girl is helping this family in a way that she can by reaching the water to them and so on. And she loves the surrounding and wants to stay here as long as she can. But this little girl has no idea about the declining fertility of the soil, and her family search for fresh parts of land in the next season. So this little girl called Renchiha, and she likes that area very much. She likes that farm and she wants to stay there always. But she is a very little girl and she does not know much about cultivation. But her family members, the elder members, they know that this land is already used for many years and the fertility has become very low, and therefore next year they are not planning to cultivate in that same land. They are searching for a new patch of land where they can cut and clean or slash and burn and do the cultivation. So they are looking for a new type of new area where they can cultivate in the next year. So what type of cultivation are they doing now? It is a slash and burn cultivation or shifting cultivation. They are not permanently cultivating in the same place, but they cultivate in different place, and they, as the fertility of the soil has become less, they are going to change the farmland. But this little girl likes the place so much and she wants to stay on there. But unfortunately, her family has decided to move to another place for cultivation. So that is a primitive method of cultivation, and still it is going on in many pockets of India and even some parts of the world, and they call it by different names and so on. So you read this textbook nicely and learn the names which are used by people of different places in India and in foreign, and learn nicely. And the next class we will continue to learn different types of farming. Today we just learned about one type of farming, that is primitive subsistence farming. The next class we shall learn another type of farming. So thank you for listening. Have a nice day.